Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Eliut Flores Caraballo. I am the director of KCWS, and I welcome you to this amazing session that we are going to have on how to build the knowledge economy ecosystem on islands. Okay, we have three distinguished presenters from three different regions of the world, and we are really going to enjoy ourselves here. I urge all participants to write their questions in the chat and also to use the reactions button so that you can give a thumbs up, your heart, or whatever to give some feedback to the speakers as they move forward. We are going to have short presentations by each panelist, and then we are going to open the discussion. We welcome your contributions in the audience through the chat, but during the Q&A session, if you prefer to speak rather than write, you can raise your hand electronically, and we will grant you permissions to open your mic and turn on your camera and say hello and ask your question live, okay? So we are going to begin our presentations this morning by Sylvain Cottong. He's an economist and futurist. Then we are going to have Mr. Dr. Héctor Jirau, who's the Director of Operations at Parallel 18. And we'll close with Marcos Lichtblau, who's the Superintendent of Science, Technology, and Innovation from Florianopolis City Hall. Florianopolis is a beautiful island right off the coast of Brazil, and it's part of Brazil. And Sylvain is coming to us from Luxembourg. So let me go ahead and so we have Europe, South America, and the Caribbean represented here. So let me begin giving you some information about Sylvain, and then he'll take it over. During his career, he has been an economist by education and a member of the New Club of Paris, and Sylvain went through a wide range of disciplines and frameworks, all targeted towards organizational transformation processes and intellectual capital building. In the 1990s, he started his career in the international film production business and then quickly moved on to the emerging internet and new media world. He then engaged in consulting activities covering digital transformation, knowledge management, organizational design, innovation management, design thinking, and change management. So now, Sylvain, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Eliut. I'm going to share my screen for my presentation.
We see it.
Okay, let's put it in presentation mode. So what I'm going to talk about is the importance of future thinking or strategic foresight or future studies. There are many terms out there. I'm not necessarily going into the details between the differences, how they are interpreted within the discipline itself. And what it means for knowledge creation in a complex world. So this is, of course, valid for islands as much as for any other type of organization or community. So let's start. What do we use knowledge for? Let's start with knowledge, So, well, usually we use knowledge for getting a better understanding of the world that is surrounding us, so making sense of it, making better decisions, or make processes and systems more efficient, innovating, mitigating risks, and also to become better humans, of course. So we use knowledge for a wide array of different purposes. But where does that knowledge come from? Often that knowledge comes from observations and interpretations of the past and the present, and not necessarily from futures. And the way we interpret what we see and consider knowledge is also based on assumptions. Futurist called is also anticipatory assumptions. Assumptions we make, they are based on our experiences, values, worldviews and underlying myth and metaphors. So mostly we're not consciously aware of where those assumptions come from on how we interpret that knowledge. So what is missing here? You may have come across the Futurist cone that futurists use to show that there are different plausible and possible futures, and that's the basic with which they work. If we open up our view to the future, we can gather knowledge from many different plausible and possible futures, including wildcards and black swans. So just to remember you that we have been hit by wildcards twice these last years, the pandemic, but also the war in Ukraine and all the consequences. Whereas black swans are different because there is no precedent. So this is something that is more rare, but it still can happen, and you have to think of it. So, and what is also missing is a better understanding on which assumptions and worldviews our different images of the future are based on, which is, again, also marking the way that we interpret the knowledge we have. So future studies, we can learn from different futures to make what? But to make better informed decisions in the present, to bring novelty into the present from different plausible and possible futures, to spot opportunities for innovation in the present, but also to mitigate risks in the present, better deal with complexity and uncertainty, because we know that there is not one path, thereby also increasing resilience, because we are prepared to many more futures, well, many more, at least the few futures that are plausible and possible. We can anticipate change before it happens and be better prepared for it. And we can also use future studies to align a community around a preferred future and support a transformation journey. So future studies broaden the learning space, and this is important here, from the past and the present towards multiple possible and plausible futures, and thereby increasing knowledge and intellectual capital. So look at future studies as something that doubles your learning space from what it is usually is, I would say. So next slide. Within future studies, there are different frameworks that are used. I'm going to talk about some of them, the most important, which is the generic foresight, strategic foresight process. But there's also a method called Futures Literacy Labs, developed by UNESCO, that is heavily used the last 10 and 15 years for transformation and visions for communities. So something that might apply also for an island context. And there's also the rising importance of the concept of anticipatory governance, developed or worked on by the OECD. So a word about forecasting, because there's a big difference between forecasting and foresight, of course. Originally, forecasting has been is considered as part of future studies, but it has very many limitations these days. Why? Well, it's only numbers. It's good math, because you project yesterday into tomorrow when you do forecasts. Forecasts are generally blind towards change. So if there is some behavioral change in the future, forecasts don't take account of them. They are also weak with intermediate time windows, so they might work for a year or two, but not beyond. We all know that all those forecasts don't happen anymore that we do. And it also presupposes constant frameworks, which is not the case anymore. So, and these type of core forecasts that don't reveal the assumptions that that are behind what they try to tell us, yield into what futurists call used futures or closed futures or colonized futures. Because we think tomorrow is more of yesterday or something in more or less the same direction, we exclude other possibilities. So we make an assumption. When we make a forecast, we make an assumption about the future, which is not necessarily the right assumption. which closes our learning space because we close the futures. We talk about used futures or colonized futures, like futurists say. Whereas foresight, on the other hand, explores possible futures and plausible futures and multiple ones, aims at intercepting change, challenges mental models, and is strong with intermediate time windows and prefers to exploit forms of collecting intelligence. So foresight is usually much more inclusive because more people are invited to take part in the foresight process than, for example, in the forecast process. So in that way, foresight is a way to decolonize the future, including challenging existing power structures, metaphors, and governance models. I don't know if you're familiar with generic foresight processes. I'm not going into details here, but that's basically what you do. It's about weak signal scanning, making sense of them, and then putting them into scenarios and action plans. Maybe it is a little bit more interesting because it shows the different types of tools and methods that can be used in the different phases of a foresight process, which, again, I'm not going into the details because that would be a course on foresight, and my point here is more using foresight and futures thinking for enlarging the knowledge space and the knowledge building space, also in the context of islands. So basically, weak signal scanning, making sense of those, building scenarios, what could happen around critical uncertainties, and then have a more wide array of view on the future that makes you more resilient in the present. Also, business consultants are talking about foresight-infused strategizing or strategic planning, which means that before you come to strategic planning, which usually is 1 to 3 years, you have the whole processes that come before, which is the foresight process. So what can we see today? Understand the change, what might happen in the future, generating options, where will we go in the future, and defining also our preferred future, and then come to strategic planning, and not before. So bottom line, forecasting is about numbers, meaningless without assumptions, and foresight is based on assumptions, mental models, and images on the future. Futures literacy labs are a kind of new tool within future studies, a little bit different than foresight. I'm not going into the differences again here because this is a kind of internal futurist discussion. But this is widely used with communities around the world, especially through UNESCO, to come up with new visions and transformation processes for the future for different type of communities around the world. So it's basically a tool that has 4 phases: reveal, reframe, rethink, and act. The reveal phase is that you discuss with participants their expected and preferred futures that already are different. Reframe, then you analyze the assumptions that are behind those expected and preferred futures. And then you discuss an alternative future that you throw in, which is not necessarily very possible, very plausible, but not unplausible and impossible neither. To take people out of their comfort zone. So to put them, to confront them with a future that is based on completely different assumptions that they would have thought of. Which then leads you to the third phase, which where you ask participants, so now you're back in the present, what are the new questions that arise now after having discussed these 3 different types of futures? And then come to a planning phase where you say, okay, now that we know what we want and not want, and we see all those possibilities, let's decide where we want to go, and not using backcasting technique. Usually, again, I'm not going into details here, but you can find that very easily by Googling. So again, this is really more and more used as a tool for deep transformation processes and also for agenda settings for communities. What comes on top of that is this notion of anticipatory governance, which is considered as a new legacy system for governance, you know. So we all know that our operative environment in the 21st century is different, well, for many reasons. Climate crisis, disruptive technological achievements, social changes, gender issues, and coming back of all those ancient threats that we thought would have been over, like rising inequalities, religious contrast, emigrations, race for supremacy, and now also the war in Ukraine, etc. So complexity and acceleration of change is what's happening right now. So anticipatory governance requires an understanding of complexity and the idea of complex systems and non-linear phenomena in policy strategies. But these policy strategies in most countries continue to be based on linear models. Due to these assumptions, experts tend to expect that each problem has a unique solution and that proportional changes in the causes, including policy actions, will produce proportional changes in the results. We all know that this is not true anymore. We can have effects of a measure in the right direction at the beginning and then adverse effects in 5 years' time, for example. So we have to be much more systemic in our thinking when talking about policies. And the most governance systems also have been set before this discovery of complexity or this raising awareness of complexity. And existing governance systems are fit for dealing with complicated issues, but not with complex issues. With another framework, I don't know whether you came across it, the Kinefin model of Dave Snowden, making a difference between complicated, simple, and chaotic situations and how to deal differently with them. I can put it in the chat after my presentation. And the acceleration of change further supports the need for new legacy frameworks. So to summarize, then my last slides, the benefits of future thinking. So it creates flexibility in decision making by moving from a focus on one future to an analysis of alternative futures. And it moves from the management of reality to the creation of possibilities. It also moves from the day-to-day operational considerations of management to longer-term transformative dimensions of leadership. It moves from the narrow problem-solving approaches to broader and deeper systemic and transdisciplinary perspectives and solutions. It anticipates emerging issues and weak signals that may derail strategic plans and policies. And through environmental scanning, strategic foresight intends to solve tomorrow's problems today and discover opportunities early on. And through logic and creative thinking, it articulates the first and second order, the long-term consequences of current issues. This, for example, one tool which is used for that, which is the futures wheel. Again, I'm not going to explain the different tools and methods because that's not the aim of the presentation. Some more benefits. It changes the temporal horizon of planning from the short term to the medium and long term. And it provides tools and methods to navigate these different horizons in time horizons. It also seeks to ensure that the inner stories of organizations or also nations are linked to systemic strategies, because we all know that often strategies fail not because an inaccurate assessment of alternative futures, but because of a lack of understanding of the deep culture. And it reduces the risk by understanding the worldviews of multiple different stakeholders, and eliminates blind spots by this procedure, because it's so inclusive as a process, and it makes the results of the process easier to be implemented. It also moves from risk avoidance to risk reduction to risk management to opportunity and innovation creation. Instead of fearing the future, you see the innovation opportunities, and use the future to change the present, which is also very important. So future thinking aim is not to predict the future, but to decolonize the future and make room for emergence via imagination and creativity, and multiply the possibilities to see and act on the present with more clarity, thereby making better sense of the present as seen from different futures. A little bit complicated, but that's what future studies is about. A little bit conceptual, I would say. So final slide, recommendations, practice anticipatory government through systemic foresight and other future studies frameworks such as the Futures Literacy Labs. Identify the right questions to be asked, make the process as open, inclusive, and participatory as possible, because the wisdom and imagination of everybody is needed here. And be prepared to question existing assumptions, the worldviews, and metaphors of your community, and define a preferred future and a corresponding action plan by embracing complexity and uncertainty rather than ignoring or fearing them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that extraordinary presentation, Sylvain. It's actually a wonderful theoretical background, if not a framework from which to continue this discussion today, because as we start talking now about how to build the knowledge economy ecosystem on the islands, the first thing we need to do is to define the preconception that islands like Puerto Rico or Floripa are just expected to be a nice tourism destination. And in our case, in Puerto Rico, at least, maybe also a place for medicine to be manufactured or sugarcane to be planted, right? So we need to think of a new feature, and we have to imagine a different feature and see us as a powerhouse of knowledge economy. So that's a different mindset. It's a new image that we need to create, the overcoming the fatalism of our declining economy and whatever, and colonial context, and to say we are going to be big and powerful. We already are artistically, right? Because Puerto Rico has many more artists famous worldwide per square mile than probably any other country in the world. But it's interesting. So let's move right into that. Now we are going to welcome Dr. Héctor Jirau. He holds an undergraduate degree in cell and molecular biology and a master's in financial engineering, and he has a PhD in biochemistry. He has been nominated and received numerous awards and recognition from federal institutions, holding a fellowship grant from the National Institute of Health, and for 4 consecutive years. Dr. Jirau worked as a financial advisor, as a state-registered investment advisory firm, separately managed account services in healthcare. He also has served as an associate at Unity Growth Fund, a private equity fund leading the investor relations and investment due diligence effort for their pre-IPO and early-stage investments in highly vetted companies like SpaceX, Thrasher, Stripe, and Klarna. He also served as investment fund manager, and today is the director of Operations and Investments of Parallel 18, a renowned global startup accelerator. He also holds ownership in early-stage companies in different sectors and maintains active participation in numerous ventures. So welcome, Héctor. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Eliut, and thank you everybody for tuning in and giving me the opportunity to share a bit of my knowledge and experience on how we have strengthened and shaped the knowledge ecosystem in Puerto Rico. So for those that do not know what Parallel 18 is a top-level performance-driven international startup program with a social mission. Briefly, we take innovation from the knowledge economies and we help any company or entrepreneur in the sector to expand and scale into new markets. We're a program of the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust, a private non-for-profit organization created to maximize our islands, Puerto Rico, participation and creation of jobs in the global knowledge economy. It has done so by providing investment, financing, access to technology, and access to additional resources for purposes of research and development, expansion, and it also manages and hosts over a dozen different initiatives that range from grants in terms of research, but also in terms of technological support for meetups, researchers, other entrepreneurs, farmers, investors, and many other groups. So extending a bit on what our fellow Sylvain was just talking about of foresight, right, of thinking forward. And that's something that we have actually driven a lot on Parallel 18. How we have done this is via 2 different programs. So we know there's a high potential for the knowledge economy in Puerto Rico to actually overcome pretty much any circumstance between connecting 2 different innovation ecosystems, and we have done so via a pre-acceleration program, but also an acceleration program. Together, we decided to change the narrative of our island's economy by promoting this type of diverse business community. And how we have done so, we actually have levered the capacity of being an island in the middle of the Caribbean between mainland United States and LATAM. So once we started, we saw that pretty much every company in LATAM would see Pearl 18 has this multinational business hub that offers structures and protection of US legal frameworks. Think about it as a straight way to do business in US without being in US. And that is one of the ways that we have potentiated the efforts of Puerto Rico in expanding and growing its own knowledge ecosystem. So we bring talent from LATAM, we bring the best and the best in the disruption in these highly vetted technologies, and we give them access to, of course, the more developed and with easier access to capital ecosystems in mainland US. This has created cultural connections to LATAM and the Caribbean. And of course, in Puerto Rico, we have a bilingual, highly trained workforce. And that is something that you actually need in order to expand and properly manage to be able to penetrate this type of market and create new collaborations. And understanding that knowledge ecosystems or knowledge economies require highly specialized workforces. As in, for many of the development in life sciences, you need scientists, you need people with PhDs and with highly vetted knowledge in order to be able to scale and create new knowledge that may develop in new technologies. It is very important that we understand the value of collaboration that's brought by a bilingual, highly trained workforce. In addition to that, we can see the results have actually worked out. So we have so far attended 14 different cohorts in pre-acceleration and acceleration. We have distributed more than $12.7 million in grants distributed so far, with more than 336 companies having graduated or benefited from our services or our acceleration programs, and more than 600 employees being hired. Creating and training and expanding the current workforce is an important step for any type of economy, particularly knowledge economy, in order to develop and scale forward. If we want to be Puerto Rico or any other island for this matter to become a center point in the development of innovation and in the development of disruptive technology, we have to start from the basics, and that is perpetuating a strong workforce that is specialized enough as in order to disrupt these sectors. And we saw the value, and we have seen it, and we continue to do so with the amount of revenue that our companies have generated so far. Companies that go through our program have generated more than $200 million in revenues, from which $73 million, almost half of it, in Puerto Rico. Now you see the power of actually penetrating disruptive technologies in the knowledge ecosystem. It perpetuates and strengthens the whole economy, not necessarily just this niche. And in terms of investment, if we are looking to expand and strengthen even further our knowledge ecosystem, we have to recognize that there is a need for investment capital. There is a need for money in order to scale further on, enough as in order to become at a certain point self-sufficient, but also reach that point where revenues make sense, particularly for highly specialized technologies, such as those found in the scaffold of a knowledge economy. Our companies have raised so far more than $189 million in investment capital, from which more than $20 million of those were raised in Puerto Rico, in a small island in the Caribbean. And this shows you that there's a huge potential for any island to mimic this. It only needs to support its ongoing entrepreneurs, to support its knowledge ecosystem by providing resources and opportunities, such as those that we have provided. In addition to the acceleration programs that we provide, we also have an investment branch that allows these companies to go step by step in the capital raising process. We give them the resources to understand the power of raising capital, how to use that capital, and how to raise that capital. We have done matching funds where we provide any company that's able to raise X amount of money, we match this money with our own funds in terms of an investment. Also, during crises such as the pandemic, any knowledge ecosystem that wants to be sustained has to count with an additional resource for unexpected circumstances, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is something we did to reshape the knowledge ecosystem. So we saw that many of our highly specialized companies weren't able to sustain themselves through the pandemic, as many of them had to close their offices, couldn't continue to operate in their day-to-day businesses, and they relied on additional capital to actually finance these operations. And that's exactly what we did. We invested an additional amount of money into each of these companies that applied. And to our surprise, more than 88% of these companies to year-to-date 2022 are still in business and scaling. We combine this, of course, with educational events as founders for potential investors, and of course, as a way to foster a healthy investment community in Puerto Rico. And this is something I encourage every other ecosystem in an island to do so. It's not enough to bring money. You can actually just give them capital. They're gonna consume that whole capital. And if they do not have the right direction and access to educational resources, they won't be able to perpetuate this scaling process that allows a company to actually grow and expand and strengthen an ecosystem, regardless of the type of ecosystem that it is. And in the end, highly specialized ecosystem has those as perpetuate in the knowledge economy actually require as many resources as any other ecosystem, if not more. With the fund and, of course, the efforts of our parent organization, the Puerto Rico Science Trust, we have been able to actually sustain this. In addition to that, we have done so far 24 investments with a 75% survival rate in our whole portfolio of investment via the matching fund, with 1.6 million invested, 12 of our investees having received more than $1 million in investment in the life of the company, and with those 11 international companies having established operations in our island. Likewise, we have done a corporate partnership program where we provide access of our companies to bigger corporate giants like Microsoft, Amazon, Liberty Cablevision, and we could spend a whole day just talking about the different corporate partnerships that we have done. And as you can see, it actually creates an impact, not only in our innovation and knowledge ecosystem in Puerto Rico, but also in Latin America and likewise mainland US. With that, if I were to give you a take-home message, as an individual born and raised in an island and seeing a thriving and growing ecosystem become what it is today, a center of innovation and a center point of intercommunications and collaboration between two giant continents, it is that we may be small, we have all the required resources and access to actually potentiate and strengthen our ecosystem and, of course, support our knowledge ecosystem, which in the end will be the one that actually holds together our whole economy. So thank you so much, Eliut, and thank you everybody for this time, and hope it serves a purpose. You can always reach out for more information if you like.
Thank you, Héctor. One of the things I like in terms of how Parallel 18 thinks of a different future, like Sylvain was saying, is that instead of seeing itself just as a grant program to help local entrepreneurs, it's actually projecting itself and built itself as an engine for the knowledge economy in Puerto Rico, and therefore your competitions are open to people from outside of Puerto Rico, but they are required to work from Puerto Rico. Exactly. So basically what you're doing is that you're bringing the best intelligentsia and entrepreneurs to live on the island and discover Puerto Rico as a market to become a headquarters for their company. And I think that's a different future that we are imagining for the country. Thank you.
Definitely. We are leveraging on our geographical advantages. And like I'd say, we may be small, but we have enough resources to make it worth a while.
All right. So let's learn now about the experience of Florianopolis. And now we are going to welcome Marcos Lichtblau. He's the Superintendent of Science, Technology, and Innovation for Florianopolis City Hall. He's actually a mechanical engineer from Universidad Federal de Santa Catarina, and he's a specialist in precision mechanical manufacturing, and he studied that in Germany. And he also has, I'm translating here from 3 different languages from the notes he gave me. He has a master's in mechanical engineering and an MBA in business, and from the Fundación Getulio Vargas, and he's the founder and president and the administration business council, La Automatiza Laser Solutions, and vice president of finance for ACATE, which is the Association Catarinense of Technology Companies. Anyway, that's as much as I can translate from 3 different languages at once. So I won't take any more of your time. If you want to highlight anything else, go ahead, Marcos. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Caraballo. I will share my presentation. Let me show you how Florianopolis changed from a normal tourist destination to a smart tourist destination. Florianopolis is the capital of the Brazilian state of Santa Catarina in the southern region of the country. The municipality is made up of the main island, the island of Santa Catarina, with a surface of 420 square kilometers, a small portion of the mainland connected to the island through 3 bridges, and some small surrounding islands. The city has a population of 516,000 inhabitants and the 3rd best human development index in the country, 0.847. Founded on March 23rd of 1673, it celebrates its 350th anniversary in 2023. The city is known as the Brazilian Silicon Island and also the Startups Island. The infographic summarizes Florianopolis' innovative entrepreneurship ecosystem with more than 200 startups, more than 50 scale-ups, more than 50 corporates, in addition to several associations, universities, co-workings, incubators, accelerators, angel and venture capital, and innovation centers. Also, the governments, municipal, state, and federal, are present in the ecosystem, helping to develop it. The city is among the first in Brazil by Bright Cities as a reference in monitoring indicators that promote quality of life. The Connected Smart Cities ranking pointed out in 2021 Florianopolis as the 2nd city in the country with more characteristics inherent to the concept of smart cities. We're taking into account pillars such as mobility, urbanism, energy, technology, innovation, economy, governance, and education. There is a municipal policy of smart tourist destination based on development of leadership, support to tourist activities, planning, and smart tourist destination strategies. I will give you some examples how we are doing this in the practice in the last years. For example, Floripa Staycation is a campaign that aims to promote and encourage domestic tourism through products and services with differentiated values for residents of the region of the city. And we have more than 50 companies that are local companies that are participating in this program. Another action is Floripa Film Commission that stimulates the visibility of the municipality as a competitive destination for audiovisual productions. whether due to the possibilities of location of places, cinematographic infrastructure, logistics, incentive plan, and trained professionals. Another program is Floripa Cidade Criativa. The UNESCO World Network of Creative Cities unites cities that recognize and support creativity as a driving strategy for sustainable development through global partnerships. It covers 7 creative areas: crafts and popular art, design, cinema, gastronomy, literature, music, and media arts. Florianopolis is a UNESCO Creative City in gastronomy, highlighting the oysters of Florianopolis consumed in the best restaurants in the city and throughout the whole country. Another example is Harmo Feedback Intelligence by one of our local tech companies. Harmo is the first platform on the market to integrate online reputation management with NPS, CES, and CSAT indexes surveys, offering a 36-degree view of the customer experience throughout the purchase journey. Here you can see some dashboards of the platform customized for Florianopolis. Have an overview or deeper evaluation of KPIs, make comparisons between different situations, and also have reports that can be customized. Tour Data is the tourism observatory. It's a touristic intelligence platform with monitoring of the tourist market, database decision-making, and control over local tourism development. We monitor the tourism offers in the city, surveys and infrastructure, and basic services. On the other hand, Tourqual is a system also of a local company of protocols for evaluating the quality and development of services and experiences. There are currently 4 services as hidden customer, evaluation, research management, analysis of online comments, and consultancy in the following areas: destination and tourist attractions, restaurants, hotels, events, breweries, and wineries. Another example is Floripa no Ponto. The digital platform informs public transport users about the bus route, the time and estimated displacement of the lines that pass through more than 1,800 stops in the municipality. In addition, the app shows the user the exact location where the bus is. Another action is Go Place. It's a public showers on the beaches. To access a shower, the first step is to download the Go Place application. Then the tourist performs a brief registration to use the service. Here you can see one Go Place shower on a local beach, very well integrated in the landscape. Another action is the self-cleaning toilets. Located on the north seafront, the self-cleaning toilets are part of the Smart Tourist Destination project of Florianopolis. Also, posters with QR code are distributed by the main tourist points of Floripa. Through the QR code, it's possible to access text and audios with information about the places. In addition to this interaction with visitors, the use of the platform generates information for the public management of tourism. Here you can see a video of a QR code posted on the Hercílio Luz Bridge, where you have a lot of information about history and about actualities of this point. Another solution is Floripa Turismo RA. It's a fully interactive tourism application that shows some of the most important historical points of the city in a much more dynamic and funny way. The application has augmented reality technology, allowing you to tour the city with a very special companion, a virtual guide that will show 5 famous points of the city in real time. Tech Road is a cooperation of 5 cities of the southern region of Brazil. Curitiba, the capital of the state Paraná, Joinville in Santa Catarina, and Florianopolis, the capital of the state Santa Catarina, Caxias do Sul in Rio Grande do Sul, and Porto Alegre, the capital of the state Porto Alegre. Established a mutual cooperation on issues related to valuation, strengthening, and attracting of new business to the area, as well as attracting talent and private or public investment for the cities. I think, Héctor, we can talk about the cooperation of Tech Road and Parallel 18 and Puerto Rico.
Definitely.
And at least Floripa Conecta is a connection movement between public and private initiatives and events in the city of Florianopolis, and created with the purpose of strengthening regional economic development, as well as joining players in technology, tourism, and the creative economy. It promotes nightlife, tolerance and diversity, community of practice, experiential lifestyle, colorless offices, knowledge and information in a unique environmental and cultural characteristics. Here you can see some pictures of the 2022 edition of Floripa Conecta that happened in August 4 to 14th. 2 pictures of the drums orchestra presentation, one of them on the Ercílio Luz Bridge and the other on the 15 de Novembro Square, as well as the old customs house with scenic lighting and a drone presentation on the dunes. And to close my presentation, I will show you a short movie with subtitles in English about Floripa. Oh, sorry.
Tem lagoa de um lado, Praia da Joaquina de outro, as dunas, que é um visual alucinante, o pôr do sol que ela proporciona.
A energia daqui é única e não tem nada parecido.
A ilha é um lugar encantador. Realmente, ninguém pode sair daqui dessa vida sem conhecer essa ilha.
There is something in the air, something in the vibe that there is here. You know, there is a good thing happening here.
Aqui nós preservamos as nossas raízes portuguesas. Uma cidade cheia de história, cultura e uma gastronomia maravilhosa.
O facto de ter uma herança cultural açoriana aqui na ilha, sinto-me aqui em casa, não haveria outra cidade no Brasil que eu escolheria viver sem ser Florianópolis.
Toda essa questão de tecnologia, ambiente de inovação e contato com a natureza, e Florianópolis é sim o Vale do Silício brasileiro.
ogni persona porta un'energia diversa e ognuna contribuisce a formare la magia che ha quest'isola.
Eu acho que Floripa é pedacinho do mundo inteiro.
Muy lindo conocer la historia de cómo era todo antes.
This island, it's a portal, and I've never been anywhere like this before.
Coisas fantásticas acontecem neste lugar.
Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marcos. That was a wonderful presentation. Actually, I had the pleasure of being in Floripa back in 2019, where we had the last face-to-face KCWS conference. And I did visit at the municipality, the Innovation Center, which is also a co-work. You had a lot of young entrepreneurs there. I was really impressed by all these programs you have, because you actually have taken care of creating a holistic environment to make people wanting to live in Floripa. And I remember talking to some entrepreneurs. They told me that the biggest challenge they had is that Brazil as a market is so huge that most of the ambitions they had for expansion was reaching the totality of the Brazilian market. Whereas here in Puerto Rico, Parallel 18, for example, and Héctor can talk about that, the objective here is to export beyond Puerto Rico, particularly because we really have great incentives here in Puerto Rico. If you actually get a tax decree for exporting, even to the US, you only pay 4% in taxes. My company, in addition to being a professor, I have my own company, and we got one of those decrees, and we're very happy about it, right? Because otherwise you pay dearly for taxes here. So let's open the few minutes we have available here for Q&A. I believe that we had a question earlier before for Sylvain from Carrillo, our friend Javier, in terms of if future studies depart from the past and the present towards multiple possible futures, how can this apply to the Anthropocene, that by definition means the closure of the existing geological epoch where past and present were marked by the Holocene climatic optimum? My goodness. Okay, can you address that in 30 seconds?
Okay, I tried to do it in 1 minute. Thanks, Javier, for the question. Well, that's specifically what, for example, scenario planning is about, you know. So if you do horizon scanning and environmental scanning, you get aware of the fact that the Holocene is starting to be over, and that one of the plausible scenarios will be a very different climate where you need to have different types of strategies for everything that you do. We know that we have a lot of difficulties right now to communicate climate change to everybody and to get to behavioral changes and adaptations in whatever direction they should go, be it degrowth or new systems or whatever, because nobody likes change, you know. But foresight is about spotting the change that is coming and be able to adapt to it. So that's basically what it is all about. So in that sense, I would say if you're trained or if you practice foresight and future thinking on an ongoing basis, you are keener to accept that these changes are ahead and that you have to adapt. That's the logical consequence of future thinking. Of course, if you only think that, as I said before, that the future is more of the past, like forecasts do, then you are in a colonized future, in a closed future, in a used future that won't allow you to adapt to the scenario that you have been spotting. So I think it's pretty straightforward, the link between future thinking, scenario planning, and the big challenges that we are facing, and this is probably the main one.
Wonderful. And Héctor, how do you react to what you heard both on the futures planning and the Florianopolis experience? What's your reaction with the Caribbean mindset?
Everything is well connected. I mean, you have to have future thinking and using foresight instead of forecasting, like Sylvain mentioned. You're actually able to manage risk properly, and managing risk properly in an island is one of the utmost important things you can do to actually sustain and control any type of change that we are pursuing or looking forward to generate in an economy ecosystem such as the knowledge economy ecosystem. Like I said, we are highly specialized. Knowledge ecosystems rely on high specializations on their workforce. So in order to properly manage the responsibilities and liabilities behind disrupting this type of technology, you have to either have very good risk management skills and also, of course, leverage on your capacities as an island. Just like Marcos mentioned, the fact that we are an island or we are small doesn't mean that we are stuck exactly where we are. We can actually expand and reach out like we have done in Puerto Rico with both Latin America. And by the way, we have had a lot of companies from Brazil as well. So we know there's potential, and as an island ecosystem, we're more than capable to do so. It's all well aligned.
Wonderful. And Marcos, how do you we were talking before, right, that the futures is for not decolonizing the future. How do you see Floripa kind of building its own identity to transcend that you're just part of Brazil? How has that thought process gone in terms of building the identity of Floripa?
Well, we are just working on this subject. Brazil is very, the visibility of Brazil is very small, and the part of Brazil that is most seen outside of the country is São Paulo and Rio. So we have a big challenge to be visible, to show that we exist, and that it is a vibrant ecosystem. So therefore we joined to the five cities movement. The first presentation of Tech Road was some days ago in Lisbon on Web Summit, and we are just working on that subject to be more visible and to show to investors and to companies, and also to show to our companies that the internal market is not the only goal they have to follow, but they also it's also important to go global outside and reach also the global market.
Manu, I don't know enough about Brazil. That requires a PhD in itself. But would you say that maybe Sao Paulo projects itself more as an industrial capital, whereas Floripa projects itself more as an innovation, more IT-oriented sort of startup capital?
Yes, it's right.
Wonderful. So, Sylvain, I see here that Gunther writes, asking you what is a trick you would recommend to politicians on how they could tell people that you cannot predict the future, but people expect this from you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a magician, no? So, but the problem is well known. I think the only way is that politicians start to admit that they can't predict the future, and that they can only try to be prepared for multiple plausible and possible futures, because they are working on it through foresight and scenario planning, and just be honest about it and try to explain that to people and invite people, the community, into the foresight process. which is maybe the trick, because foresight today, it used to be practiced in kind of ivory towers like 20, 30 years ago as a discipline. But today, one of the main new characteristics of foresight and future thinking is that it is very participatory and very open, because you need the wisdom of everybody to come up, to get to a sense making of the weak signals and to come up with scenarios that are plausible and that you can work with. So I think that the trick is that they have to admit that this has all changed, but they have the tools to deal with it through anticipatory governance, which is a new legacy system. There are also discussions about, of course, this changes a little bit the democratic process, anticipatory government. So we have to talk about that. So there are some issues here, but it's probably the only way to go.
Thank you. As we come to the close of this session, I want to bring to your attention a point that was brought into the prior session, in the keynote of this morning. And that is that islands usually feel sort of isolated in a way, and we think that we are alone against the world. And I think that there's a great opportunity for islands to work together and build a network of collaboration, and in this case, co-opetition. So I think I actually thought this back in 2019. I'm sorry I didn't follow through, but I think now there is an opportunity, now that we have two key players in the innovation ecosystem of Floripa and Puerto Rico. And if you want, I would love to be a facilitator. Héctor, I have some cachaça here so we can do some mojitos and caipirinhas, and we can start talking about that and get together with Marcos, because I think there's a great opportunity for Floripa and Puerto Rico to collaborate, and maybe Floripa can help the entrepreneurship organizations fostered by Parallel to open a business in Brazil, and for the Floripa companies to discover the Puerto Rico and the US markets through Puerto Rico. So I think that we need to bring forces together so that we can achieve our objectives, even though it may seem that we are competing, we're actually collaborating in growing both of our economies. Let me see, do you guys want to comment on that? Go ahead. All right. So we have a final comment because we have to close from Belina. Hi, Belina. Politicians are also lobbied and heavily influenced by companies, institutes, and other organizations that have vast resources to do what Sylvain is talking about and influence toward, backed up by the campaign finance, their own desired futures. So important to think about how politicians choose to include everyone whose creativity and wisdom are needed, or choose to exclude those who cannot pay their way to the table. Sylvain, any comments on these approaches really being used for inclusion, especially of those who are usually excluded and marginalized?
Yes, so much of the work that is done in futures thinking is specifically heading towards more inclusion, and also hearing the voices of people that are normally not heard. So the first question in the foresight process is always, who is not in the room? And of course, the problem, as you stated it, Velina, is exactly like it is. So there are big lobbyists that put a lot of money to push politicians toward their desired preferred future, which is a colonized future, because it leaves out all the other types of futures. That's also why futures studies has a subversive component, if you want so, because it challenges these metaphors that are just put by some power structures and that defines the images of the future, to come up with new metaphors that are shared by everybody. But the way to do it is really to include everybody, also the marginalized communities, because if everybody agrees that this should be our new metaphor, it will become a little bit more complicated for those with the heavy money to try and sell their preferred future as the best future for everybody. But it's an ongoing process.
And actually, from a very practical standpoint, I just want to finish this, and Héctor, check out what I'm going to say, because it touches on what you do. In Puerto Rico, there used to be a time back in the 40s through the 80s or even 90s that people thought that the investment incentives were reserved for the powerful few who had connections to the government and who get the grants and the tax breaks and whatnot. And in a good way, they were right. I mean, the delivery we saw, and a lot of people got millions and millions of dollars, never delivered anything, and they just ran away with it. However, what programs like what Parallel 18 and what Marcos have presented in a way have democratized access to grants, and they have made it competitive and performance driven. So, and I know because my son was actually an entrepreneur in pre-18, and I've been researching what they do for a while. And I know that this way, and they have panels that are not political or anything, and they have to make these competitions very open and very clean. And finally, again, thinking of a different future and building a different future, people now have a perception that these competitions are clean, and that if you have a good idea and access to a browser, even if you don't have a dime, you may get a fair share, a fair opportunity at actually getting a grant for innovation and being there. I'm not getting any money from P18 on this, but I just seen this happening. Marcos, Héctor, I don't know if you want to comment on that perception that analysis I just made.
It's completely true. I mean, like you just mentioned, Eliut, there was this perception that the incentives that were being put in Puerto Rico were just to benefit the high net worth individuals or the ultra high net worth. But the reality is that there has been a lot of impact as well on the developing communities, on the developing and nascent ecosystem by then of Puerto Rico. Because 5 years ago, let's get more conservative. 10 years ago, there was no Parallel 18 or something similar. It was very difficult to actually scale up.
Grupo Guayacán was there.
Oh, Grupo Guayacán was there. I stand corrected, true. But there weren't really that much opportunities for you to actually just push forward and drive entrepreneurs into developing new technologies and be able to expand and scale as they are now. Now, people do still have a lot of bad perception on the tax incentives, etc. But in the end, it is generating some solid impact in Puerto Rico, and it has actually allowed many of the entrepreneurs that felt a bit scared on taking that first step to actually take it and move forward. And as an island, I said this is one of the best things you can do to push forward the growth of the economy.
Marcos, very quickly, did you have to fight similar perceptions or activities, actual delivery in Floripa?
Yes, for sure. Actually, we are running a very nice project called Floripa My Stack that is offering education, technology education for about 4,000 people, 4,000 young and also grown-up guys in Florianopolis to change or to get new skills to work in the technology area. And this is for all the people. So we are bringing these opportunities to the public schools. And in this way, we are helping people from all the country, from all the city to get good jobs in this very promising area.
Wonderful. Guys, I should apologize for going over time, but I just can't because the discussion was amazing. So I'm sorry I cut into the break, but you still have 5 minutes to do a bio break before we go to the next session. And I believe that you're going to enjoy the next two panels. Now we have concurrent sessions. and I would encourage you to pick the one that you like. And remember that all the links to the specific sessions are on the program. And we put the next two ones right here on screen so that you can use it. So please join us there. And thank you, Belina, for your nice comments. Thank you to Marcos, to Héctor, and to Sylvain for their brilliant presentations. We look forward to hearing more from you. And I will take charge of doing that Mojito Caipirinha conference pretty soon, because we need to get the islands to work together. And maybe Sylvain can bring some chocolate to the party. All right? Take care, guys. Bye-bye. See you in the next session.
Thank you so much, Eliut. Take care.